opened up the foundation documentation. Here's a link to that. Now, it just happens that they now have a bunch of videos that weren't there before, so that's kind of nice. But from this, I got to the main documentation page where we can learn all about foundation. So here's, I think it takes you to this welcome page. So here's a link to that. So if you want to learn more about the layout tricks we're using and stuff like that, feel free to look this up, watch some of the videos, whatever you want to do. So first thing we're going to learn about right now, if we go to General in the sidebar here and click on Grid, Foundation is based on a grid layout, or it can be based on a grid layout if you choose to use this part of it. And what that does is it makes a grid of 12 columns wide. And we can take advantage of that to lay things out a certain way if we want to. So last time we just manually said all this should take up 80% of the width. This time we're going to use Foundation's grid to do this. One nice thing about this is it is designed responsively. What we mean when we say responsive design, well, who can tell me that? Dom or Maniz? Maniz. Yeah, for different screen widths. You can change the layout of the page slightly. So make it look okay on phones and tablets and stuff, as well as on the desktop. So we're going to take advantage of this at least a little bit. Again, not the primary point of the course, but we can do a little of that without too much work. So we're going to. So back in index.html, inside our body, notice our documentation here says, it's still a little small. Start by adding an element with a class of row. This will create a horizontal block to contain vertical columns. All right, so let's do that. Let's make a div with a class of row. And then what I want to do is I want to make something that takes up, say, 8 of the 12 columns. We can know from reading this documentation that it's based on a 12-column grid by default. So we want the middle 8. So it'll be 2 on one side, 2 on the other, right? To make a total of 12. So we'll make another div inside. Then add elements with a column class within that row. Specify the width of each column with the small dash and then some number, medium dash and some number, and large dash and some number classes. So what those mean, if I said small 8, that would mean a small screen or larger. If I say medium 8, that means medium, on a medium and larger screen, make this 8 wide. So I could have them different, take up a different number of columns on different screen sizes. I'm just going to say medium or larger for now. So I'm going to say class equal medium dash 8. And then I need a column class as well. Medium 8 column. So it's an 8 column div. Notice by default, column has an alias columns. You'll see columns actually in most of their examples, despite the fact that that's apparently the alias. Column or columns both work. And here's an example. So let's try this. Let's just put an H1 in here with our title, Jefferfescence. Refresh the page. Let's inspect this to see what's going on. All right. It's not the full width, so that seems to have worked. but it's not centered like we wanted. So we want it to be the middle 8 out of 12, not the 8 on the left. So we could put another 2-column thing to the left of it if we wanted, but there's also another thing built in. Let's find that documentation again. Offsets. So move blocks up to 11 columns to the right by using classes like large offset 1 and small offset 3. So if we want to leave 2 empty columns to the left, you could say medium offset 2. So 2 empty columns, 8 columns, and then there'll be another 2 to the right of that. So that should center it. Cool. Hover over it, and yeah, it looks like that's the middle 8. If we make our screen smaller, ooh, sooner or later, it goes all the way to the left and gets really small. So that appears to be the break point for their small to medium. So on small, since we said medium or larger, it's going to take up all 12 because we didn't say otherwise. But that's exactly what we wanted, because on a phone, just showing the middle 8 would be really small. It would leave ridiculous gaps on the side. So that's why we chose medium instead of small. Cool. All right, so we've got an H1 in there. Where did I put that? Here it is. Okay. So under our H1, let's put a form. The action attribute that it wants to put in there by default, by the way, is where you would point it at some backend URL that'll process the form. We don't have one, so we just get rid of that. We're doing it all on the client side. Inside the form, let's have another grid, basically. If we want to, okay, let's do this one step at a time, actually. Let's just go ahead and put our input in our submit button. So let's put a text input. Name equals flick name, movie name, whatever you want. Picture name if you're all fancy. If you like to go to the pictures. We like to keep it real around here. We call it flick. I'm going to go ahead and put these attributes on new lines so it's just a little more readable on the big screen. And to make it clear where this tag ends, I'm going to put my my little angled bracket on a line by itself. So this style, by the way, if you are going to put line breaks in the middle of your tags, in between attributes, this is kind of the style that I see most often. You indent all the attributes, and then you line up the closing angle bracket with the opening angle bracket. It's a little ugly, but it's pretty dang common in React, so we're just going to do it that way. And instead of using labels this time, we'll use the placeholder attribute. Name a flick. Refresh the page, see if it shows up. It does. Notice the little placeholder in there. Name a flick. Start typing, placeholder goes away. Backspace over all of it, placeholder comes back. Magic. Let's add our submit button. So underneath our input, let's make a button. Not just any button, we want it to be of type submit. That way, when you click that, automatically the default behavior will be to submit the form. And as before, when we submit the form, we want the event that we listen for When what happens? When the form is submitted. Not when the submit button is clicked, because that wouldn't capture it when we hit enter, right? When the submit button is clicked, then we'll do whatever it is we do. Okay, so type equals submit. And we'll say add flick. Cool. Refresh. Okay, there it is. I'm going to go ahead and, to make this bigger, I'm going to do this. So we're now using the small size, but that's okay. All right. Now there's no border around that button. Darn this new flat style that everybody's so into. But if we look at the foundation documentation, let's look at controls. Seems like that's where buttons would be. Yep, under controls we have button. Buttons are convenient tools when you need more traditional actions. Yeah, we know what buttons are. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. There it's telling us about type equals button or type equals submit. Ooh, pretty colors. So let's see if it says some more about this. So there's coloring. Okay. Color classes to give buttons additional meaning. So button primary, button secondary, button success, button alert, button warning. You like button success for this? Button primary, which you like better? What I do when I did it at home. I think, yeah, I made it green. Success is good. So we'll give it a class in addition to its type. Success, and there was a class of button on there too. Fine. Go ahead and just make this a little easier to read. Separate multiple classes with a space inside the HTML. We know we would just put another dot. All right, cool. We have a form. If we want to do a little bit more formatting on this thing, we could. Looking at the documentation for Foundation again. Somewhere along here. Button group. Sounds interesting. What about back under General? I saw forms. So let's look at the form stuff that's built into Foundation. They set out to create an easy, powerful, and versatile form layout system. Let's see if they succeeded. Okay, text inputs, blah, 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 blah. We know. Number inputs, text areas, select menus, checkboxes and radio buttons, field set styles, help text, label positioning. Boy, there's all kinds of good stuff here. What about inline labels and buttons? So to attach extra text or controls to the left or right of an input field, I want this button to kind of hug the text box instead of being on a line by itself. Wrap the elements in an input group container. Then add these classes to the elements inside. Okay, so first things first, let's wrap these. So inside the form, I'm going to put a div with a class of input-group. I'm going to indent all of this, keep it readable, make it easier to figure out what's inside that div. Okay. And then add these classes to the elements inside. So input group field on a text field, input group label on a label, input group button on a button, place the button inside this wrapper. So not right on the button, looks like. You put a div with a class of input group button around the button. Okay, but on the input, on the text field, we're going to say class equals input group field. So input, type equals text, class equals input group field. Then the button we're going to wrap inside another div with a class of input group button. Indent. Okay, so both the input and the button are inside this input group. The input has a class of input group field. The button is inside another div with a class of input group button. Refresh. And now look, it's just growing right out of the side of that input. I like that better. All right, we have a form. That's progress. Do we want to give it an ID? We're probably going to need to do something with this later. Maybe we give our form an ID real quick. Form ID equals flick form. All right, add flick form. Very good.